The feral hog population has exploded in Texas, and wild hogs roaming free here have some in a Beaumont neighborhood on edge.
In the Texas Hill Country, feral hogs were disappearing, and the trail camera footage proved it. The camera runs for weeks at a stretch on a fence post, firing off 1,000 throwaway frames nobody ever watches. Grass drifting in infrared static, a water trough, nothing. And then one week, the footage shows something different. Not a hog in sight, not one. Where a camera used to log dozens of hogs a night, there's a raccoon, the wind, and silence. For 2 years, this kept happening across Blanco County, and nobody could explain it. Ranchers walked fence lines they hadn't checked in weeks and noticed the ground wasn't torn up anymore. The wallows dried and crusted over, the game trails going to grass. Some assumed the hogs had simply moved to the next property. Then the same silence turned up there too, and the one after that. Ranchers blamed disease. They blamed poachers. Wildlife officials spent real money trying to find a cause and came up empty. Then they found the answer, and it wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't a government program. It was already living in the brush the entire time. And once officials understood what they were looking at, the official guidance changed almost overnight. To understand why that answer stopped people in their tracks, you have to understand what feral hogs actually are in this country, because pest doesn't begin to cover it. Right now, biologists estimate somewhere between 6 and 7 million feral hogs roaming free across at least 35 states, including Georgia, Florida, and Louisiana, where some of the most concentrated research on this problem has been conducted. A population that has nearly tripled since the early 1980s. Texas alone holds more than 2.5 million of them, expanding into new counties at a rate of several miles a year. A mature hog can weigh over 200 pounds, some push past 300, armored with thick hide and tusks that self-sharpen as the animal grows. A sounder, a family group of sows and their young, can tear through a cornfield overnight and leave it looking bulldozed, the soil rooted up until there's nothing left but broken stalks and churned mud. And beyond the crop damage, there's a public health dimension that doesn't get enough attention. Feral hogs are documented carriers of pseudorabies and brucellosis, diseases that can spread to livestock and, in the case of brucellosis, to humans who handle infected animals. It's part of why wildlife agencies treat the hog problem as a biosecurity issue, not just a land management one. And here's the thing, almost nobody covering this story stops to explain. These animals didn't get this tough by accident. Today's feral hog is a hybrid, stitched together from 2 separate invasions centuries apart. The first wave came ashore with Spanish explorers in the 1500s, domestic pigs that escaped or were deliberately released to establish a future food source and simply never stopped breeding in the wild once they were loose. The second wave came far more recently and far more deliberately. In the early 1900s, landowners across the South imported Eurasian wild boar, specifically for sport hunting, penning them on private estates, and inevitably, some got out and found the descendants of those escaped domestic pigs already running loose in the same country. What you get from that cross isn't a soft farm animal gone feral. It's something closer to hybrid vigor in its purest form. Faster growth, higher fertility, sharper survival instincts, all folded into one animal that nobody actually designed on purpose, and nobody has figured out how to fully undo since. And that cost shows up everywhere. Nationally, the damage bill from that hybrid runs into the billions of dollars a year in ruined crops, broken fences, fouled water sources, and collapsed creek banks. And they are astonishingly hard to stop in ways that trace directly back to that ancestry. Feral hogs are smart in a way that punishes complacency. Build a corral trap, bait it for 2 weeks until an entire sounder walks in and out like it's their own kitchen, and you'll still almost never catch all of them. The ones that get away, the ones that feel the gate slam and watch their family panic against the panels, are educated for life. They never walk into that trap again, and a sow leads her piglets around the edge of the bait from then on, the whole next generation inheriting the lesson before they've even tasted the food. Pressure them with hunting instead, and they go nocturnal, expand their range, and stop responding to calls at all. Then there's the math, and this is the part that breaks people who work in wildlife management. A single sow can breed before she's a year old and produce 2 litters annually, 4 to 12 piglets each. Run that forward across a real population, and wildlife biologists arrive at a number they repeat like a warning label. To simply hold a hog population steady, not shrink it, just stop it from growing, you have to remove roughly 60 to 70% of it every single year. Miss that number by even a little, And the population doesn't plateau. It compounds. So when entire sounders across parts of the hill country started vanishing, officials weren't relieved. They were suspicious. How do you explain a population disappearing when the math says it should be growing? If disease had swept through, there should have been carcasses lying in the brush, bloated bodies, the smell carried on the wind, scavengers circling for days. There was almost none of that here. If hunters were responsible, word would have spread fast. Hog hunting is practically a regional pastime in that part of Texas, and a season that productive gets bragged about at every feed store and gas station within 50 miles. Nobody was bragging. Whatever was erasing these hogs was doing it quietly, efficiently, and without leaving the kind of trail a hunter or a pathogen leaves behind. One of the tools researchers use to track hog movement is called a Judas pig. Capture a single hog, fit it with a GPS collar, release it, and let its instinct to rejoin a group lead trackers straight to a sounder they'd otherwise never find in dense brush country. It's built on the one weakness that outlasts all of a hog's intelligence: the need to belong. Researchers used exactly this technique in the affected areas, and the sounders they tracked kept shrinking between visits. Not scattering, not relocating. Shrinking animal by animal, with no obvious explanation showing up on the ground. Before we get to what the data actually showed, take a second and drop your best guess in the comments. What do you think was quietly erasing entire sounders without leaving a trace? So they went back through old trail camera archive footage, the kind that gets tagged once as coyote scavenging, and never looked at again because nobody expected it to matter. And this time, the pattern held up against real published data. A 2025 study out of Texas A&M and the East Foundation sampled coyote diet on an unmanaged ranch in southern Texas. The researchers Anna Racy, Tyler Campbell, and John Tomachek, published in the Canadian Journal of Zoology, weren't even looking for a hog story. They just wanted to know what coyotes were actually eating when nobody was managing the land at all. What they found? Invasive wild pigs showing up in 14.4% of everything the coyotes had consumed. Second only to white-tailed deer. Not an occasional scavenged meal off a carcass someone else killed. A consistent, documented part of the diet, showing up study after study across Texas and Georgia, going back to around 2014, when researchers first started noticing coyotes, keying in on feral hog piglets specifically. Here's what makes that genuinely surprising. The conventional wisdom about coyotes, repeated for decades in field guides and around ranch country, was that they're edge scavengers, not hunters of anything as large and dangerous as a hog. A sow defending piglets is one of the more ferociously protective animals in North America. She will charge a grown man without hesitation. Coyotes were supposed to know better than to test that, but coyotes are also the most adaptable predator on the continent. The one species that answered a century of poison campaigns and government eradication efforts by spreading into all 49 mainland states anyway, including the middle of major cities where nobody expected them to survive at all. When one food source dries up, they switch to rodents, fruit, insects, whatever the land offers next, and the land had just started offering an endless, self-replenishing supply of piglets too young and too slow to keep pace with their mother. So once officials had that data confirming what was actually happening, they faced an uncomfortable, very practical question. In these specific pockets where predation was already suppressing hog numbers for free, would spending more money and manpower to blanket the area with aerial gunning and large-scale removal actually help, or would it work against itself by scattering the very packs doing the useful work? This is where the real answer replaces the myth, because it's not a story about helicopters getting grounded nationwide, and aerial gunning hasn't slowed down anywhere else in Texas. It's something quieter and honestly more interesting than a dramatic policy reversal. Wildlife management guidance in Texas, specifically the framework known as Integrated Wildlife Damage Management, or IWDM, explicitly addresses this exact scenario. When a predator is already naturally suppressing a problem species in a given area, removing that predator in the name of a different management goal can directly work against the larger one. The recommendation in cases like this is targeted, not a retreat. Don't blanket remove the coyotes doing useful work in that particular zone. Focus limited resources elsewhere, on properties where no natural pressure exists at all. Let the pressure that's already there keep doing, for free, what a helicopter costs hundreds of dollars an hour to attempt. That's a real documented principle in integrated wildlife damage management. And it's a far stranger thing to sit with than a simple nature wins headline, because it means the very agencies fighting an animal that costs the country billions of dollars a year had to admit that in some specific places, doing less was the smarter move than doing more. It's not a clean victory, and it was never going to be. A single sow can still outbreed a hungry coyote pack in most of the 35 states where hogs have established themselves. And coyotes aren't even the only predator quietly doing this work. In parts of Florida and along the Gulf Coast, American alligators have been documented preying on hogs frequently enough to matter wherever the two overlap. In Florida specifically, the Florida panther, one of the rarest large cats in North America, has also been documented taking feral hogs, adding another apex predator to the mix in that region. In the Western Hill Country and parts of the Rockies, mountain lions do the same, with black bears adding their own pressure wherever their range crosses hog territory. None of these predators were introduced or managed for this purpose. They simply happened to already live where an invasive, hybrid species showed up and adapted to what was suddenly available to eat. But here's the honest complication nobody puts in the headline, and it's worth understanding before you decide how the story ends. Wildlife researchers themselves are careful to say that the actual extent to which coyotes are controlling the overall hog population still hasn't been fully verified. Coyotes are clearly eating a meaningful share of piglets. Whether that's enough on its own to meaningfully suppress a population that can double in 5 years is still an open scientific question, not a settled victory. The trail cameras don't lie about the silence. They just can't tell you yet whether that silence is a trend or a temporary lull in a war that's still overwhelmingly being won by the hogs everywhere else. So here's the real question worth asking. Knowing how fast both of these animals learn and breed, and knowing scientists still aren't sure how much of this solution is real, who do you think is actually winning this fight 10 years from now? The hogs, the coyotes quietly working against them, or the agencies caught in the middle trying to figure out when to step back and when to step in? Let me know where you land in the comments.